The call came from Pearl Harbor while my family was screaming the lyrics to a Taylor Swift song. I didn't hear the call, my father did. The base said I'd been injured during training and taken to the hospital. They asked for next of kin. My father didn't come. My sister didn't come. Instead, she tagged me in a photo from the stadium, arms raised, lights, blazing a caption that read, "Family together." Life with no drama feels so good. I didn't comment. I didn't cry. I lay there wired to machines, realizing that when it mattered most, I was the inconvenience they left behind. My name is Claire. I'm a U.S. service member stationed in Hawaii, and until that night I believed something simple and stubborn: if I showed up for my family, they would show up for me. It's an idea you don't question when you grow up being the reliable one, the one who answers calls, the one who figures things out, the one who doesn't make a scene. The first thing I noticed when I woke was the sound. Not voices, machines. A steady beep, a low hiss, a rhythm that didn't belong to me. My mouth felt like cotton. My head throbbed with a dull, relentless pressure, as if someone had wrapped my skull in a tight band and kept pulling. I tried to move my right hand and felt a tug, a reminder that my body wasn't entirely mine at the moment. Tubes, wires, tape pulling at skin. A nurse noticed my eyes flutter and leaned into my field of vision. "Claire," she said gently, as if she were stepping into a room where someone was sleeping. "You're okay. You had an accident during training. You're safe." Safe. The word floated above me, weightless and unconvincing. She asked me to squeeze her fingers. I did. She smiled. "Your family's been notified." I waited for the rest of the sentence. "They're on their way. They're calling back. They'll be here soon." The nurse adjusted a monitor and moved on. There was no rest of the sentence. Hours or minutes, it's hard to say, passed in fragments. I drifted in and out, catching pieces of conversation like debris after a storm. Concussion, observation, lucky. Someone mentioned Pearl Harbor, and for a second I thought I was dreaming of home of the water, the way the light breaks across it in the late afternoon. Then the pain surged, and the dream dissolved. When I was lucid enough to ask for my phone, the nurse hesitated. Just for a few minutes, she said, like she was handing me something fragile. The screen lit up my face. Messages from my unit, missed calls from numbers I recognized, and then the tag notification. My sister's face filled the screen, bright and unbothered. Stadium lights turned the night into day. She had one arm around my father, the other raised high wrist, glittering with a bracelet I recognized, one I'd helped her pick out weeks earlier. My mother stood on the other side, smiling like nothing in the world had ever asked her to choose. The caption sat beneath the photo, cheerful and sharp all at once. "Family together." Life with no drama feels so good. I stared at it until the letters blurred. I didn't scroll. I didn't react. I locked the screen and set the phone face down as if it could bruise me if I looked again. There's a specific kind of silence that follows a realization like that. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It settles in your chest and makes room. I didn't tell the nurse. I didn't ask if anyone had called back. I focused on breathing through the ache in my head, on counting the beeps, on not crying, because crying felt like it would split me open. I've trained myself to compartmentalize. You learn that early. You learn to put things in boxes and label them later. The problem is that sometimes later arrives when you're lying in a hospital bed and there's nowhere left to hide it. They kept me overnight. Then another night. Tests, checks, careful instructions delivered in calm voices. I was lucky, they said. The kind of lucky that doesn't feel like luck at all when your body is sore and your mind keeps replaying a caption you wish you could unsee. I told myself my family didn't know how bad it was. I told myself there were flights and schedules and confusion. I told myself anything that would keep the edges from cutting too deep. People don't choose concerts over their children, I thought. Not really. Not when they understand the stakes. On the third day, my strength began to return in small, uneven increments. I could sit up without the room spinning. I could eat half a bowl of soup. I could walk to the bathroom with help. I could check my phone again. That's when I saw the missed calls. 86 of them. They stacked up like evidence, each one time-stamped and insistent. My father's name appeared again and again, the way it does when someone has decided you are the solution to a problem. There was a single text beneath the calls, sent less than a minute after the last missed ring. "We need you. Answer immediately." Not how are you, not are you okay. Not I'm sorry, just need, just now, just urgency without context. I felt something inside me go very still. For years I'd answered that tone. I'd dropped what I was doing, rearranged my life, smoothed things over. Being needed had been my role. It was how I stayed connected. It was how I proved my worth. If I was useful, I belonged. I turned the phone over in my hands and watched my reflection wobble in the dark screen. I looked thinner, paler, older than I remembered feeling. The machines hummed behind me, patient and indifferent. I thought about the call from the base, the one that had reached my father. I imagined the moment, him glancing at his phone, deciding it could wait. I imagined the lights dimming in the stadium, the roar of the crowd rising, the choice made without ceremony. I didn't feel angry, not yet. Anger requires energy. What I felt was clarity. There are moments in life when the story you've been telling yourself stops working, when the excuses collapse under their own weight, when you realize that the thing you've been protecting isn't actually fragile, it's just empty. My phone buzzed again in my hand. Another call, another vibration that said, "Come fix this." I took a breath. I told myself I wouldn't rush. I told myself I would think. But the truth is, habits are hard to break, especially when you're tired and hurt and wired to machines that remind you how quickly things can go wrong. Without overthinking it, I answered. "Claire," my father said, relief and impatience braided together in his voice. "Finally, we need." He stopped as if remembering something, or pretending to. And that was when I understood that whatever they wanted from me had nothing to do with my accident, and everything to do with what they were afraid of losing. When my father paused on the other end of the line, I could hear the calculation happening in real time. A small, almost imperceptible shift, like someone realizing they'd walked into the wrong room and deciding how to play it off. "Claire," he said again, softer this time, "how are you feeling?" It wasn't concern, it was a placeholder. "I'm in the hospital," I replied. My voice sounded thin to my own ears, unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone else. "You know that, right?" Yes, of course," he said quickly. "The base called. We were surprised." Surprised, not worried, not scared. Surprised like I'd shown up unannounced to a dinner party. There was noise in the background, traffic maybe, or the echo of a large indoor space. Not an airport terminal anymore. They'd made it home. That realization landed heavier than it should have. "We're just trying to understand what's going on," he continued. "Things are a little complicated right now." I closed my eyes and let my head rest back against the pillow. The ache behind my temples pulsed in time with the monitor. Complicated. That word had always meant, "Please make this easier for us." "You didn't come," I said. I kept my tone even. I'd learned a long time ago that emotion only gave him something to argue with. There was a sigh, the kind that's meant to signal exhaustion, to flip the script so the person calling is suddenly the one who needs understanding. "Claire, don't start. You know your sister's been planning this for months. Tickets like that don't just..." "So the answer is no," I said. "You didn't come." A beat of silence. Then defensively, "You're strong. You always have been. The doctor said you were stable." "They said I was injured," I corrected. "They asked for next of kin." "We knew you'd be fine," he said. And there it was, the sentence that had followed me my entire life. "You'll be fine. You always are." It was the excuse that let everyone else off the hook. I ended the call before he could pivot back to whatever he actually wanted. My hand shook slightly as I set the phone down. I stared at the ceiling, at a small crack near the corner that looked like a lightning bolt frozen in plaster. This wasn't new. That was the worst part. This wasn't some sudden betrayal that came out of nowhere. It was the natural conclusion of a pattern I'd spent years pretending not to see. 4 weeks earlier, before the accident, before the machines, before Pearl Harbor called my father, I'd been standing on the seawall near base, watching the sun drop into the water. Hawaii sunsets have a way of making everything else feel temporary, like whatever you're worried about can wait until tomorrow. My phone rang. "Dad." "Hey," I'd said, balancing it between my shoulder and ear as I stretched my neck. "What's up?" "We need your help with something," he'd said, skipping the greeting. "It's about the family paperwork." Those words again. Family paperwork. They came up whenever money, property, or responsibility was involved, whenever something needed to be handled quietly and efficiently. That was my department. I'm in the middle of a training cycle, I'd said. Can it wait a bit? It really shouldn't, he replied. It's about your grandmother's estate. Just routine things. We might need you to review a couple documents. My grandmother had died 2 years earlier. I'd attended the funeral on leave, standing stiff in my dress uniform while my sister cried dramatically into our mother's shoulder. Afterward, my father had pulled me aside and said, "Don't worry about the details. I'll handle everything." I'd been grateful at the time. I'd trusted him. "I can look at it next week," I'd said then. "Email it to me." There'd been a pause. "We were hoping you could just sign off on it," he said. "To keep things simple." Simple. Another loaded word. Simple usually meant fast. Fast usually meant no questions. "I don't sign things I don't understand," I'd replied, half joking. He'd laughed, but there was an edge to it. "You've always been so serious." That military mindset, I guess. Later that same week, my sister had called. She was breathless with excitement, talking over herself the way she does when she knows she's about to be the center of attention. "You are not going to believe this," she'd said. "Dad surprised us with tickets, front section, like insane seats." Tickets to what I'd asked, already guessing. "Taylor Swift," she said, squealing. "The big one. We're all going together," Mom cried. "That's great," I'd said, meaning it in the automatic way you do when you know your role in the conversation is to support, not to participate. "You should try to come," she added almost as an afterthought. "But I know you're busy with, military stuff." Military stuff. Like it was a hobby. Like it wasn't the reason I lived 3 time zones away and woke up every day with the weight of responsibility pressing down on my chest. "I can't," I'd said. "I've got mandatory training." Well, she'd said lightly, there will be other concerts. There wouldn't be other chances to show up for me, apparently. That part went unsaid. Back then, I'd brushed off the tightness in my chest. I'd told myself not to be dramatic. That was another family rule. Feelings were fine as long as they didn't inconvenience anyone else. Lying in that hospital bed, now replaying those conversations, the pattern was impossible to ignore. When my family needed something from me, time attention signatures, I was essential. When I needed them, I was optional. A knock at the door pulled me back to the present. A woman in civilian clothes stepped in, holding a clipboard. She introduced herself as a patient liaison, asked how I was feeling, explained the next steps. Before she left, she hesitated. "Your emergency contact information," she said carefully. "We had some trouble reaching them at first." "I know," I said. "If you'd like to update it," she offered, "we can help with that." I looked at the form in her hand. My father's name sat at the top, neat and official. Below it, my mother's. Both people who had chosen a concert over a hospital room. "Yes," I said, "I'd like to change it." She smiled gently and handed me a pen. As I wrote in a new name, someone who had actually answered their phone, someone who had asked, "How are you?" instead of "What do we need?" I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not revenge. Resolve. My phone buzzed again on the tray beside me. Another call from my father, another demand disguised as concern. This time I didn't answer. And for the first time I didn't feel guilty about it. Changing my emergency contact should have felt like a small administrative detail. Instead, it felt like a line drawn in wet cement, one that would harden whether I was ready for it or not. The name I wrote wasn't family by blood. It was Maya, my closest friend on base, the person who knew my schedule better than my parents ever had. She knew when I'd been pulling extra hours when I hadn't slept, when the headaches had started creeping in and I'd brushed them off as dehydration or stress. She was the one who'd noticed my hands shaking during drills the week before the accident. "You're pushing too hard," she'd told me then, standing beside my car in the parking lot as the sun sank low and turned the asphalt gold. "I know we're trained to push, but you're not invincible." "I don't have time to be fragile," I'd replied, half smiling already, thinking about the next obligation, the next call I needed to return. She'd looked at me for a long moment, eyes narrowed in a way that said she wasn't buying it. "You're not fragile," she said. "You're tired. There's a difference." I'd waved it off the way I always did. There was always a reason to keep going. There was always something waiting if I stopped. Before the accident, my days had blurred together into a predictable rhythm. Early mornings, physical training, long hours, the kind of exhaustion that settles into your bones and becomes familiar. On top of that, there were the calls from home. Questions, requests, comments disguised as jokes. "You're so good at handling things," my father would say. "You've always been the mature one." It sounded like praise. It took me years to realize it was a sentence that absolved everyone else of responsibility. The week before the training exercise that changed everything, I'd flown back to the mainland on short leave. Not for rest, for family. My sister had asked me to help organize a small gathering for a friend, something she was too overwhelmed to manage herself. "It'll be nice to have you home," my mother had said over the phone. "We don't see you enough." When I arrived jet-lagged and running on caffeine, the house was already buzzing with plans that had nothing to do with me. Lists taped to the fridge, decorations half unpacked, my sister moving through the rooms like a director on opening night. "Claire, can you run to the store?" she'd asked without looking up. "We're out of napkins." "I just got here," I'd said, setting my bag down. And she'd replied, smiling sweetly, "You're the efficient one." That phrase again, efficient, useful, reliable. That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, I'd sat alone at the kitchen table scrolling through my training schedule on my phone, mentally preparing for the week ahead. My head had started to ache, a low-grade pain that pulsed behind my eyes. I'd pressed my fingers to my temples and waited for it to pass. "Don't tell me you're getting sick," my father had said when he came in for a glass of water. "You've got that big thing coming up, right?" "Training," I'd said. "Yeah." "Well, you'll be fine," he'd replied, already turning away. "You always are." The next morning I'd found him on the phone in the living room, voice lowered. "Yes, she's handling it," he'd said. "No, she doesn't need to know all the details yet." He'd noticed me, then stopped mid-sentence. "I'll call you back," he'd said into the phone too quickly. "What was that about?" I'd asked. "Just boring paperwork," he'd said, waving a hand. "Nothing you need to worry about." I should have pushed. I should have asked questions. But I'd learned early that pressing too hard only made me difficult, and being difficult meant being excluded. So I nodded. I always nodded. Back in Hawaii, the headaches worsened. They came in waves, sharp flashes followed by a lingering fog. I mentioned it to Maya once in passing. "You should get that checked," she'd said immediately. "I don't have time," I'd replied. She'd frowned. "You make time for everyone else?" I'd laughed it off. Occupational hazard. The night before the training exercise, my sister posted a countdown on social media. 3 days until the concert. 2. 1. Each post more excited than the last. My phone buzzed with notifications as friends tagged me in the comments. "Wish you were coming, next time you're missing out." I stared at the screen, a strange tightness settling in my chest. Missing out. That was one way to put it. The morning of the exercise dawned clear and bright. The kind of day that makes everything feel possible. We ran through the plan-checked equipment, exchanged the usual half-jokes that mask nerves. I felt off, slower, heavier, but I told myself it was nothing. I'd pushed through worse. The accident itself was sudden and unglamorous. A misstep, a momentary loss of balance, a jolt that sent pain radiating through my body like electricity. I remember the sound of someone shouting my name, the sky spinning, then nothing. Now, lying in a hospital bed days later, those memories replayed with an eerie clarity. The way time had fractured, the way everything I'd been carrying, expectations, obligations, silence, had finally dropped all at once. My phone lit up again. Another missed call from my father. Another message followed. "This is serious. We can't do this without you." Without me, not for me, not with me, without me. I deleted the message without replying. The liaison returned later that afternoon with paperwork explaining procedures, timelines, what to expect over the next few days. She spoke calmly, professionally. When she finished, she looked at me with a softness that surprised me. "Do you have someone with you?" she asked. I thought of the stadium lights, the raised arms, the caption. "Yes," I said, "I do." And for the first time I meant it. As she left, I reached for my phone, not to answer my father, but to call Maya. She picked up on the first ring. "I heard you updated your emergency contact," she said. "About time." I smiled weakly. "I'm sorry." "Don't," she replied. "Just focus on getting better." "I will," I said. And in that moment it felt like a promise I could actually keep. What I didn't know yet was that my father's urgency had nothing to do with concern, and everything to do with something he was about to lose. The doctors called it a training-related accident, the kind of phrase that smooths sharp edges and makes everything sound smaller than it felt inside my body. What it meant in real terms was that I'd been lucky enough to wake up and unlucky enough to remember how close I'd come to not doing that. Pearl Harbor is usually loud. Planes' overhead engines humming the constant movement of people who know exactly where they're supposed to be. From my hospital room, the world sounded muted, like someone had turned the volume knob down, but left the tension intact. I could hear the ocean when the wind shifted just right, a distant rush that reminded me where I was and why I'd come here in the first place. A corpsman stopped by early that morning to check my vitals. He moved with the kind of efficiency that comes from doing the same careful motions 100 times a day. "You gave us a scare," he said, lightly wrapping the cuff around my arm. "Your unit was pretty shaken." "My family?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. He hesitated just long enough to tell me everything. "We reached out," he said, "left messages." I nodded, that was all. Later, a different officer came in, older, calm, the kind of presence that makes you feel steadier just by sharing the same space. She introduced herself, explained what the next few days would look like, asked if I had questions. I listened, asked about timelines, recovery restrictions, all the practical things. When she finished, she sat back, slightly studying me. "You're handling this well," she said. I almost laughed. Handling things well had become my brand. "Someone from your family may call," she added gently, "if they haven't already." "They have," I said, "just not about this." She didn't press. She didn't need to. People in this line of work learn quickly when to leave things alone. As the day wore on, my phone stayed quiet. No apologies, no explanations, just the occasional message from my unit checking in, offering support. Maya stopped by in the afternoon bringing coffee, and that look she gets when she's trying not to say, "I told you so." "You scared the hell out of me," she said, setting the cup down carefully. "Next time you want a break, just ask." "Noted," I replied. She pulled up a chair and sat, eyes scanning the room, the monitors, the stack of paperwork on the counter. "Have they said anything useful yet?" she asked, nodding toward my phone. "Depends on your definition of useful," I said. She raised an eyebrow. I told her about the calls, the text, the tone. "That's not concern," she said flatly. "That's panic." For what I asked. It was the question that had been circling my mind since the first missed call. She leaned back, arms crossed. "Only you would know that." That night, sleep came in fragments. Pain meds dulled the edges but couldn't quiet my thoughts. Somewhere between midnight and morning, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail notification. I stared at it for a long moment before pressing play. "Claire," my father's voice said, strained now, urgency bleeding through the words. "We really need to talk. This can't wait. Please call me back as soon as you get this." No mention of Pearl Harbor. No mention of training. No mention of injury. The next voicemail came less than an hour later. "There are some documents," he said. "Time-sensitive ones. We're running out of options." Documents. There it was again. In the pale light of early morning, I asked the nurse for a notebook. She brought one without comment. I began writing, not feelings, not accusations, just facts. Dates, calls, requests, patterns. Seeing it laid out on paper did something strange and clarifying. This wasn't chaos, it was structure. And I'd been a piece in it longer than I wanted to admit. Around noon, a call came through from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring twice before answering. "Claire," a man said. His voice was measured, professional. "This is Thomas Hale. I'm calling regarding your grandmother's estate." My grip tightened on the phone. "How did you get this number?" "You're listed as a beneficiary," he replied calmly. "I've been trying to reach your father, but he suggested I speak with you directly." Of course he did. "There are some matters that require your attention," Hale continued. "Given your current situation, I wanted to make sure you were aware." Aware of what I asked. There was a pause, brief but deliberate. "Of your role." After the call ended, I sat very still. The pieces clicked together with a sickening ease. The urgency, the timing, the sudden need. I called my father back. He answered on the first ring. "Thank God," he said. "Listen, we need you to sign something. It's just a formality, but it has to be you." "I'm in the hospital," I said. "You know that." Yes, but this can be done remotely. It's simple." "What am I signing?" I asked. Another pause, longer this time. "Claire," he said, slipping into the tone he used when he wanted compliance. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. It's for the family." The family. The same family that had chosen stadium lights over a hospital room. "I need to see the documents," I said. His voice sharpened. "There isn't time for that." There is, I replied. If there isn't, that's not my problem. Silence stretched between us, taut and revealing. Are you going to help us or not? He asked finally. I looked around the room, the machines, the IV pole, the window framing a slice of blue sky. I thought about the call from Pearl Harbor, about the caption, about the 86 missed calls. I'm going to help myself, I said, and ended the call. I didn't know exactly what my father was afraid of losing, but I knew one thing for certain. Whatever it was, it mattered more to him than I ever had. Once I said it out loud, I'm going to help myself, there was no taking it back. The words echoed in the room long after I ended the call, settling into the spaces where fear used to live. I expected guilt to follow. It didn't. What came instead was a quiet, steady awareness, like the moment after a storm when you realize the house is still standing. My phone stayed silent for almost an hour. No calls, no texts. It was the longest stretch of quiet I'd had since waking up. I let myself rest, staring out the window as clouds drifted lazily across the Hawaiian sky. It was almost unfair how beautiful the day was. Then the buzzing started again. Not just my father this time, my mother's name lit up the screen, then my sister's. Group messages appeared, threads springing to life like they'd been waiting for permission. Honey, please call us. This is getting out of hand. Dad is really stressed. You don't understand what's at stake. I read them slowly, one by one, letting the words land. Not one asked how I was feeling. Not one acknowledged the accident. Everything circled the same invisible center urgency without empathy. Maya noticed my expression from across the room. They back at it, she asked. Full force, I said. She rolled her eyes. Of course they are. I handed her the phone. She skimmed the messages, jaw tightening. They sound scared, she said. And not the good kind. I think they finally realized I'm not available on demand, I replied. About time. That afternoon, Thomas Hale called again. He spoke carefully, choosing his words the way people do when they know they're stepping into something personal. I wanted to make sure you received my message earlier, he said. And to clarify a few things. I'm listening, I said. Your grandmother established a trust several years before her passing, he explained. It was structured to transfer certain assets directly to you under specific conditions. My heart thudded once hard. What conditions? Completion of your service obligation, he said, and confirmation that you are acting independently. Independently, the word rang in my ears. She was very clear, Hale continued. She wanted this to be yours, not managed by your parents, not shared unless you chose to share it. I thought of my grandmother's quiet smile, the way she used to press folded bills into my hand when my parents weren't looking, just in case she'd say. I'd always assumed it was kindness. I hadn't realized it was foresight. Why now, I asked. Because your father recently attempted to initiate a transfer, Hale said evenly, without your consent. There it was, the missing piece sliding neatly into place. After the call, I sat in silence, absorbing the weight of it. The trust wasn't just money, it was leverage. It was freedom. And it was the reason my family had suddenly remembered how to reach me. That evening my father showed up. I heard him before I saw him, his voice at the nurse's station, confident and familiar as if he belonged everywhere he went. When he stepped into my room, he wore the expression he reserved for public appearances, concerned, composed, just the right amount of paternal worry. Claire, he said, arms opening slightly, then stopping when he saw my face. You look tired. I am, I replied. He pulled a chair closer, lowering himself into it with a sigh that suggested sacrifice. We've been worried sick. I didn't respond. Your sister's taking this very hard, he continued. The whole situation has been stressful. For her, I said. He flinched just a little. For all of us. Did you come because I was hurt, I asked, or because you're afraid of losing control? His jaw tightened. That's not fair. Neither was leaving me here, I said quietly. Silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. He cleared his throat. Your grandmother would have wanted us to work together, he said, as a family. She wanted me to have options, I replied. That's why she made the trust the way she did. He stared at me, surprise flickering across his face before he masked it. You spoke to the lawyer. I did. His shoulders sagged slightly, the performance slipping. Claire, he said softer now, you don't understand how complicated this is. I understand exactly how simple it is, I said. You didn't come when I needed you. You came when you needed me." My sister burst in, then cheeks flushed, eyes bright with something between anger and panic. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You're tearing the family apart." I looked at her, really looked. At the glitter still clinging to her wrist from the concert. At the phone in her hand already poised to capture something dramatic. "I didn't tear anything," I said. "I stopped holding it together." She scoffed. "You're being selfish." The word hit familiar and sharp. I'd worn it before. I knew how it fit. "I nearly died," I said calmly. "You sang along to a chorus." Her mouth opened, then closed. For a moment, something like doubt crossed her face. Then it hardened. "You're overreacting," she said. "It was an accident." "So was your caption," I replied, "but you didn't take it down." She looked away. My mother lingered in the doorway, silent eyes rimmed with red. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence had always done enough damage on its own. "I'm not signing anything," I said, turning back to my father. "Not now, not later." He stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said, "I'm making a choice." They left soon after. Not with apologies. Not with understanding. With frustration and unfinished sentences, and the certainty that the dynamic had shifted in a way they couldn't control. When the door closed behind them, Maya exhaled. "Well," she said, "that was something." I leaned back against the pillows, exhaustion washing over me. "It's not over," I said. She nodded. "No, but it started." As night fell, I stared at the ceiling again, at the crack shaped like lightning. For the first time since the accident, I felt something close to peace. Not because things were resolved, but because they were finally honest. And honesty, I was learning, had a way of changing everything. The night after my family left the hospital felt quieter, like it was holding its breath. The monitors still hummed, nurses still passed by, but something fundamental had shifted. The tension that had been wrapped around my chest for years loosened just a fraction. Enough to breathe. I slept better than I had since the accident. Not deeply. Pain has a way of keeping one eye open, but without the constant jolts of anxiety that had haunted me since waking up. When morning came, sunlight spilled across the floor in a thin golden line, stopping just short of my bed. I watched it for a long time, letting the warmth soak in. Thomas Hale called mid-morning. His voice was steady, professional, unchanged by the drama of the night before. "I wanted to check in," he said, "and to make sure you're comfortable with the next steps." "I am," I replied, and I meant it. He explained the details carefully, laying everything out with the precision my father had never offered. The trust wasn't extravagant in the way people imagine when they hear the word. It wasn't a lottery ticket or a secret fortune. It was something far more meaningful, enough to change a life quietly. Enough for a home, enough for security, enough to say no. "Your grandmother called it your safety net," Hale told me. "She worried about you being the one who always gave." I closed my eyes, imagining my grandmother sitting at her small kitchen table, glasses perched on her nose, thinking several moves ahead while everyone else was focused on the present. She had seen this coming. Maybe not the accident, not Pearl Harbor, but the pattern, the imbalance, the way love in our family had always come with conditions. "What happens if I do nothing?" I asked. "Then nothing changes," Hale said. "Your father continues to push. You continue to deflect. The trust remains untouched." "And if I take control?" I asked. "Then it becomes yours," he replied simply. "In practice, not just on paper." After we hung up, I asked the nurse to wheel me down to the small courtyard outside the ward. The air smelled like salt and flowers. A palm tree cast shifting shadows across the concrete as the breeze moved its leaves. Maya joined me, carrying 2 cups of bad hospital coffee. "You look lighter," she said, handing me one. "I feel different," I replied. "Not lighter, clearer." She nodded. "Clarity can be dangerous. People don't like it when you stop playing your part." As if summoned by the thought, my phone buzzed again. A text from my father. "We need to talk. Just you and me. No lawyers, no interference." I stared at the message, the old instinct rising, the urge to smooth things over, to compromise, to meet him halfway, even when halfway was still too far in his favor. I let the feeling pass. "You can talk to my attorney," I typed back. "I'm focusing on my recovery." The reply came almost immediately. "This isn't what your grandmother would have wanted." I smiled faintly. He always reached for her name when he wanted moral authority. He didn't know that she'd already spoken for herself. Later that day, my mother called. I almost didn't answer. When I did, her voice was small, hesitant. "I didn't know how bad it was," she said. "Your father didn't tell me everything." "You were notified," I replied gently. "You chose not to come." There was a sniffle on the other end of the line. "Your sister was so excited. We didn't want to ruin the trip." Ruin the trip. I'd nearly lost my life, and they'd been worried about ruining an experience. "I'm not asking you to feel guilty," I said. "I'm asking you to understand." Silence stretched between us. Then quietly, "I don't know how to fix this." I considered the question carefully. "You don't fix it with words," I said. "You fix it by showing up, over time, if you want to." She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Your father is very upset." "I know," I said. After the call ended, I felt the familiar tug of responsibility, the urge to manage his emotions, to soften the blow, to make it easier for everyone else. I recognized it now for what it was, a reflex, one I didn't have to obey. That evening, my sister posted again. A vague message about loyalty and betrayal wrapped in pastel colors and inspirational quotes. Friends commented with hearts and sympathy. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Her performance no longer required my participation. A few days later, I was cleared to leave the hospital with strict instructions to rest and follow up regularly. Maya drove me back to my apartment, filling the silence with stories about work, about small, ordinary things. It felt grounding, like stepping back into a life that belonged to me. The paperwork arrived the next morning. Neatly organized, clearly explained. No pressure. I signed where I was supposed to sign, not out of defiance, but out of intention. The act itself was anticlimactic, no dramatic flourish, no immediate consequences. Just a pen moving across paper. Still, I felt the weight of it, the finality. When my father realized what I'd done, his reaction was swift and unfiltered. Calls, messages, accusations. He accused me of ingratitude, of selfishness, of tearing the family apart. For the first time, I didn't argue. "I'm not taking anything from you," I said during our last conversation. "I'm taking responsibility for myself." "You owe us," he snapped. "I don't owe you my silence," I replied. That was the last time we spoke that week. As days passed, the noise died down. My sister blocked me on social media. My mother sent short, careful texts. My father stopped calling altogether. The absence was startling and strangely peaceful. One afternoon, as I sat on my balcony watching the ocean stretch endlessly toward the horizon, Maya joined me with a grin. "So," she said. "What now?" I thought about it. About recovery. About the trust. About the future that suddenly felt open instead of predetermined. "Now," I said slowly, "I build a life where I don't have to beg to matter." She raised her coffee cup in a mock toast. "I like that plan." As the sun dipped lower, casting everything in warm light, I realized something else too. The accident had taken a lot from me, strength, time, certainty, but it had given me something I hadn't known I was missing. The courage to choose myself. Recovery isn't a straight line. Anyone who's been through it knows that. Some days you wake up feeling steady, almost normal, and you think, "I'm past this." Other days the weight settles back in, quiet but insistent, and you realize healing is as much emotional as it is physical. 3 weeks after I left the hospital, I returned to base for a limited duty check-in. Walking past the water again, this time upright, unaided, felt surreal. The same breeze, the same horizon, a different version of me moving through it. People stopped me in the hallway. "Glad you're back. You scared us. Take it slow." Simple sentences spoken without expectation. No one asked me to fix anything. No one needed me to perform gratitude or resilience. They were just there. That mattered more than I'd expected. My father didn't call during those weeks. Neither did my sister. My mother sent a card in the mail, no return address, no apology. Just a line written in careful cursive, "I hope you're resting. I love you." I held the card for a long time, unsure what to do with it. Love without action had been the currency of my childhood. I'd learned to accept it because I didn't think there was another option. Now I set the card on my desk and let it be what it was. Not nothing, not enough, just a beginning maybe, or not. One evening after physical therapy, I sat on my balcony watching the lights come on across the water. Maya joined me carrying takeout and that familiar look that meant she was about to ask something real. "Do you miss them?" she asked gently. I thought about it. About the idea of family I'd carried with me for so long. About the version of myself that had believed love could be earned through compliance and silence. I miss who I thought they were, I said finally. I don't miss who they actually chose to be. She nodded. That makes sense. A few days later, my father showed up unannounced. I was folding laundry when I heard the knock firm deliberate the way he always knocked when he wanted to remind people he was in charge. I stood there for a moment, hands stilling on the fabric, listening to my heartbeat. I didn't owe him anything. Not access, not explanations. Still, I opened the door. He looked older, smaller somehow. The confidence he usually wore like armor was cracked just enough to let something uncertain show through. He held a cardboard box in his hands. I won't stay long, he said. I brought some things. Inside the box were photographs, old ones. Me at 6 missing 2 teeth and grinning like the world was a friendly place. My grandmother holding my hand. A stack of letters I'd sent from boot camp carefully kept. I didn't know what to do with them, he said. Your mother was cleaning. I thought you should have them. I didn't invite him in. We stood there, the space between us charged and fragile. You didn't come when I was hurt, I said, not accusing, just stating a fact. That changed something. He swallowed. I know. Knowing isn't the same as fixing it, I said. I'm trying, he replied quietly. I studied him, searching for the familiar pull to make things easier, to smooth the edges. It wasn't there. What I felt instead was measured compassion, real but bounded. Trying means showing up when it's uncomfortable, I said. Not when you're afraid of losing something. He nodded, eyes shining with unshed tears. I understand. I believed he meant it. I just didn't know if it would last. You can call, I said after a moment, but it has to be about me, not paperwork, not money, me. He nodded again. Okay. He left then, the box still in my hands, the night air cool against my skin. I closed the door and leaned back against it, letting out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Change, I was learning, doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It arrives quietly through boundaries kept and patterns broken, one choice at a time. Months passed. I returned to full duty. The trust settled into my life not as a windfall but as stability, a cushion that let me make decisions without fear. I moved into a small place closer to the water. I slept better. I laughed more. I stopped apologizing for existing. My sister didn't reach out. That was her choice. My mother sent occasional messages, careful, tentative. My father called every few weeks, asking simple questions and waiting for real answers. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what I'd once hoped for. But it was honest. One afternoon I sat with Maya on the same seawall where I'd stood weeks before the accident. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. You okay? She asked. I smiled. Yeah, I really am. For a long time I'd believed strength meant endurance. Taking what was given, staying quiet. Now I understood something different. Strength was choosing myself without bitterness. It was walking away from roles that hurt me. It was letting love be something that shows up, not something I chase. If you've ever been the one everyone relies on but no one checks on, if you've ever been labeled drama for asking to be seen, I want you to know this: you're not too much. You're not difficult. And you're not wrong for wanting care. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from, or share a moment when you chose yourself, even when it was hard. And if you want to keep hearing stories like this, stories about boundaries, healing, and finding your worth, please subscribe so you don't miss the next one. We're walking this journey together.